Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the CLSR. And I'm your host, the counselor. And today we're going to be talking about a rather serious subject. A colleague of mine had discussed something with me the other night about some issues they're having in their relationships. And actually, I shared this information with a good friend, right? We kind of know each other, all three of us, but some better than others. However, when I discussed the relationship that my friend was having some issues with a good friend of mine, uh, they were like, why do they put up with it? Like, why do they deal with it and why do they stay? Why can't they move on? What's wrong with them? And see, maybe people who've been in relationships or very challenging or abusive relationships, maybe some of these people can definitely identify with that, right? Like if you're in that situation, they're familiar and maybe even they've moved out of it, right? And they might not understand why somebody would stay in it, right? Well, that's where it becomes a little bit more complex because you got to think it can be different things for different people. But that is a very common question out there that a lot of people ask themselves, like, why do people put up with it? And I think that's what we need to discuss today. Some of the reasons why people stay in abusive relationships, right? Like, why do they stick around? And there are a number of reasons, and it's different. So I think we should cover a few. Like, one of the most obvious um, things and reasons that occur in a relationship for people sticking around is fear. The most obvious is going to be the fear. And fear in many different ways, right? They're afraid not only of their partner, or they might be afraid of what other people might think of them, right? If they get out of that relationship, right? They might feel also threatened by a partner too, once and again, right? Where they're feeling, you know what, I'm just too afraid to make that move. I don't really know what's going to happen if I do, leave. Like, or maybe I do have a good idea of what will happen. This person, I've been with them so long, they're so committed to me. Maybe what they're going to do is they're going to stalk me or, refuse to give me up, right? So, in that situation, of course, a person's not going to feel like, they can move on. They're going to be, that's just one of the most common is fear. Fear of, number one, what a person will do to you, like a partner, or fear of what your friends may say, or fear, just fear that you're going to live in fear. Because some of them might be living under a roof and living in occasional fear, right? Where they're like, I can manage that, and once in a while they blow up, but I can manage it. And that's a fear that but it's a manageable fear. But what we don't talk about is that fear that's outside the home that some people will have. And I don't mean, oh, is that person going to get angry because I'm leaving and maybe I might see him or I'm. No, this is a fear outside the home where you don't feel, you know what, leaving is going to benefit you, right? Whereas at least you're maintaining if you're in the home, because there are people that will figure they'll understand their part to that degree where they'll go, well, if I move out, if I go on, this person is never going to give me up, or I got to change my whole identity. See, like there's so many things. Like I gotta, either people that I knew or friends that I met, I might have to disassociate with just because of it. Like there's so many things that are to be understood about why people stay. But fear is a big one, right? And it could be fear of staying or going. It just, how does it outweigh? How does it weigh out, basically? Either or, right? Which is greater? Which is the greater fear? Whether if I'm staying here or if I'm out there fearing for my life, what's the sense? Like, if I'm not really leaving the situation. That could be just one of the reasons, right? But also, there are people, and this is going to really be sad to say, that unfortunately, there are people who believe that's become the normal, right? Like, the things that are going on in the relationship that it's just not, you know, it doesn't feel right, but you don't know different. So you're feeling like this is just the way it is. this is the way it is. This is the way I got to accept it. And, they don't even really know what a healthy relationship is, really, right? Because maybe they grew up in that environment where it was even going on in their family, or this is something that they observed coming up. So when they're living it on their level, when they get older, it might not appear to be so out of character, out of the norm. Basically, it just becomes the norm, and so they start to believe that this treatment that they're getting, it's normal, right? But right, it happens, right? There's also a fear of, you know, it getting out, right? Think about it. Like, you could, and see, we're starting to catch up with humans as far as respecting everybody. We got a long ways to go, but just even outside of the heterosexual relationship, the gay community, LGBTQ, that type of thing, even, right? Those people are like, they have their situations too. And it's not just those people. I mean, all of us. And the reason why I refer to those people, because we've never referred before, and we should have been. We should have been talking about people as people, right? That's where we come from. But us, we're a selfish people in general. Can't we find it hard to get along across cultures? But let's say, for example, you're in a relationship, right? And of the same gender, and then you got the pressure of the society out there, the normal, standard, traditional, right? And you might not want you to be outed. You might feel that, listen, we've had this relationship, it's cool with us, we're going along, whatever, we've been in this relationship, and then when at times you've had enough and you want to go, but then you got the peer pressure out there in society. You're afraid of the pressure, right? you know Maybe it'll reveal the secret that you got going on in your relationship. That's hard. That's heavy duty for some people, right? Gay, lesbian, right? Different cultures, people of different cultures, right? People of different cultures out there, there's different rules and expectations and cultures that make it hard sometimes for relationships to come, regardless, right? Because of that traditional, right? That little norm that's been established for generations. It's hard to break. So even across culture, it becomes very challenging. So there are challenges in the first place, but then you might stay into it because you're like, you know what, I can't risk anymore. You know what I mean? I don't need any more persecution or what have you. And that's a part of fear, just being outed, especially if you're trying to explore your sexuality and there's enough pressure out there. You don't want to, you know what I mean, do yourself in by going out there, so you feel you got to stay and deal, right? And it's out there. These are issues that are being brought to the table slowly, but they do need to be talked about. What's going on out there, right? Because it's a lot of pressure, and sometimes I think we don't raise people today to go for assistance or help because it's looked down upon in many different ways. Even if it's light counseling or just checking in, like young people, if they go through those phases, we have to advise them to do that. But just the fear of being outed, that if you talk to somebody, a professional or someone, right, not just a friend, like we do talk to friends, we're going to do that anyways, but I'm talking about professional. When we talk to people who got some skills, and right, like not there to tell you what to do but to help you, right? When we talk to them, it's going to help the situation. At least it's going to be a vent so that you could feel you have choice. Whatever the choice you decide, somebody, number one, will be somebody you talk to. Also, you have to think, number two, is somebody that knows you're having some issues and might keep an eye on you, right? We got to think about that too, right? So there's different ways, and I think we have, as older people, we have to encourage that conversation. Okay, but these are real. These are fears. But what about being embarrassed? Very big heart. That right there. Like, because people are very judgmental, right? Just embarrassment to admit that something's going wrong. Like that could be so embarrassing, like, because you got to understand those people are going to feel like they did something wrong. if they have to come out and say that somebody's abusing them, right? Like they don't want to be as perceived as someone who doesn't know how to deal with abuse, right? Or who's weaker, right? They don't want to be judged. Or they might not even want the pressure of somebody saying something to them, right? Because it could be very embarrassing, and which is very understandable. An embarrassing feeling when somebody's taking your power or your control or is sucking the life out of you, right? So you get to that point where, I can't take anymore. I don't want it. I don't want to be judged like that. So they deal with it, or they try to deal with it. But it is very embarrassing. And how could this not? Like, you could imagine if you're in a situation where you really don't want to be in, and there's something going on where this person, they're putting the blame on you constantly, right? Especially when if you're being victimized, they're putting the blame on you for their out of control, their behavior, right? They're putting that blame, right? So they're double whammying those people, which means they're taking out on them twice as hard because they're not only doing the behavior, the act, they're blaming the other person, right? Like you make me do this, or you say things that tick me off, right? Like these are things where it causes a lot of low self-esteem in people if you keep hammering them down, right? If you keep knocking them peg by peg and putting them down and they don't feel their just worth, and like if that's going on, then that self-esteem has gone out the window. And you're going to think, obviously, once your self-esteem goes out the window, you clearly are going to feel powerless, and you're going to believe it's your fault. You're not just because of them, but you're going to say, well, I put up with this, I guess. I don't even feel I got another choice, right? And there's that crazy thing that they call that impacts these relationships, especially when people stay when they might otherwise leave. There's that crazy thing. And we know what that crazy thing is, right? Love, right? Just because that person's abusing you doesn't mean you don't love them. It's just they don't know how to show you love. But people like to turn around and go, "Oh, you know what? How could you love some?" No, that's not the point. This person loved that person genuinely before this abuse came along. And the abuse came along, didn't change the love, but it could change it, transfer it to hate. But what I'm saying is, genuinely, that's why the person stays, because they still have some love for that person, right? Rarely are people 100% all good or all bad. See, if we could just understand that, right? Put it into perspective. Rarely are people 100% all good or 100% all bad. And that's what you got to look at. Like, what percentage is good and what percentage is bad? Are you a 20-80? 20% bad and then 80% good? And see, those are the ones that fool you, right? Because they're always trying to be good and then they pull out that bad attitude once in a while, right? They regulate it so well. It's almost like the person inside is kind of confused, like if they're being mistreated or it's just their occasional flare up. It's really complex, right? But to understand this dynamic that I'm talking about, it's so wonderful. But if more people realize that, right? Don't just take people and put them into one category. Understand that there are a couple of things going on with people, and you have to balance how it's working for you, right? But if you've come with the 20% love and 80% abuse, then you got a serious problem, right? But not rarely is it all or none. And sometimes people get away with it longer when they know you don't know the difference between the two, right? You just are waiting for it to get all bad or a blow up or a breakdown, and then you react. So they keep testing you in between. It's a very complex game. However, we do need to be aware of these things. Love, right? You might love that person, but that person's not reciprocating that love. And see, it's funny because this is the thing too. Like, when people say that they love you, let's say, for example, someone's telling you they love you, and all the while they're manipulating you or abusing you or oppressing you or disrespecting you. See, this is what I'm talking about when you use the word love. See, that right there is that person giving themselves permission to be forgiven, right? Oh, baby, you know I love you. So that person is telling themselves, trying to tell you that they love you, right? But they're giving themselves permission and forgiveness because the truth of the matter is that they're wrong, right? They're not being congruent. Their behavior is not matching their words, right? So it's incongruent. They don't match, so it doesn't make sense. But for that person to keep on and stay in that relationship or even commit to continuing to get you to think it's your fault, what do? That's what they do. They tell you, oh, you know, I love you. Nobody's going to love you like I love you. And that's the way it goes. And you decide, yeah, they do love me. But there are things going on that are showing you otherwise. And so that's why love, we have to watch what the definition of love. People say, oh, love has so many definitions to it. I don't think it does. I think love should only have a couple definitions. I'd say three definitions, right? If you're thinking about you're in a relationship, you should be getting three minimum, the good golden three, right? You should get some care, you should get some respect, right? And some relation. That's what you should get, right? That's it. And that will equal love, care, respect, and relation. Do you understand? Show that person that you care, right? And always respect them, treat them how you want to be treated, and relate, which means, you know what I mean? Show your connection, and appreciate each other, relate to each other, learn to build rapport with each other through this life, and always understand it is a learning thing. But I'm just saying, when it comes to love, people use it. And I would even say abuse it. Because if you're not being consistent, it's just a word. But people stay in relationships because they hear it so much and they've been classically conditioned. And I love that term, classically conditioned. And see, this is what it is too. And you got to think about this, classically conditioned. Think about it. What is Maslow's theory? The point is that when somebody keeps doing something continuously, like love, they are programming your mind after time, so you just forget it. So in your mind, it just becomes commonplace, and you just automatically click into that acceptance because they're saying it so often, right? It becomes commonplace. You can't think anywhere else. You're being programmed when people are doing that, but people do it, right? But my point is, it is a point where it's classical conditioning, and you hear it all the time, and you fall for it, right? So you don't even think for yourself because you know what? You're going on autopilot. This person's working it, right? So that's why I said be careful. Congruency is very important, all right? There's no other word that could really represent how people feel when you're in a crowd of people, you're a well known person, and you got to give people the perception that you're doing really well. However, in the end, you're really not doing that well, right? You might be playing a game. And so the big thing about it is that pressure. From the outside, you look like everything's hokey dokey, right? Everything's great. And that's what people have come to expect of you. But see, the tables could turn. The tables could turn at any time. And see, this is where it comes to play, right? You get tested, but the tables could turn at any time. And you think you're going along on a natural path where everything is going to be hokey dorky. But if something turns, that's when your situation can turn, your mind changes, right? Once it kicks in, if it happens, you could have been good for years, then something happens in your relationship where it just really tests it or pushes it to that point where you're at no returns, and you're going to think to yourself, well, not only do I got to deal with that feeling, right, I got to deal with the fact that I got peers out there that are looking at me, right? And I'm going to be, afraid that maybe they're not going to look at me favorably. And actually, they might look at my partner more favorably than me. So there's a fear right there. That pressure, that social peer pressure, is a big one. And we often say, "Oh, I don't care what people think." That's a lie. Most people, and if not all people, care about what people think. To what degree is another thing, but we care about what people think. And see, when you care too much about what they think, it's hard for you to express what you think or how you're feeling, right? It's hard for you to tell your friends what's going on, that's going to break that perception of you. Never mind being number one, it's what they think of you. And some of them might think, oh, that's a strong person. I could never see them putting up with that. And because you know they think that of you, you're following and staying in that footprint where you're just idle in your home situation. You don't move. You're just feeling like, nah, I'm not doing it. See, this is where it takes some serious self reflection and some support because there's a peer pressure. And society puts that pressure. People say, oh, you put it on yourself. No, people are very judgmental. We all know that when we were in elementary school, kids, the comments that came up, what? Very, very disturbing, some of them, right? Rude. So through time, yeah, they get older, but they're just more sarcastic when people don't like you. They can be rude and nasty, right? We got to get back. But the point is that pressure alone will stop people from doing what they might need to keep themselves, in check, healthy, well balanced. It's just the way things are. It's pressure. But there's also the dynamic of what about people who are in different cultures and religions? They have their reasons for, that is bigger. And it seems to be coming bigger and bigger, even in this country, Canada, because it's very diverse, right? And that is a big thing. There's countries out there operating on this serious principle of pressure and laws and limitations. And so if that's what's happening, you come here and you have these relationships, you can see a lot of people from these different cultures who are having those norms, where it's in their, I don't know, their religion or whatever, that this is how it's going to be, right? No matter what you think, this is how it's going to be. And the sad truth is, I've seen, heard, you know what I mean? Learned about people who are getting killed over that stuff because these norms have to be maintained, and it's sad. It's heartbreaking, and it should not be going down, but it's going down, right? And it's sad. And I mean, all cultures need their work for sure. But what I'm saying, there's a bunch of them that, you know what I mean? That cultural pressure, and they're afraid that even just leaving that situation, there could be ramifications, right? They might be in a religion, but if their religion is you got to stick with him, and then you don't stick with him, everybody's gonna look bad at you if you ain't following, right? Because then that's a lot of pressure. That's the cultural and religious pressure that influences whether you stay or not. And that is a big one. As the world becomes more diverse, that's a big one. But also when we talk about these young people out there, let's just do a little bit of talk on these young people, because these young people out there, they're dealing with something that will, unfortunately, there's a double whammy too, because they got some serious thinking to do. Think about the young girls who end up pregnant, right? They've got some real challenges, and especially when they're young, if they end up pregnant with another young person, right? And they're number one, they're trying to figure out their life, but now they got a baby coming on the way, and they got maybe with a guy that they thought they loved, but this guy might have turned out to be something he's really not as cute as in high school, right? Not as capable either, doesn't want to work, whatever. It's messing with the relationship, and all of a sudden it turns ugly, right? That's a young scene. And then that person doesn't want to leave because, number one, they don't know. This is a new baby, never had a baby before, don't even know what the future is, and they're looking to him to save the day. Or they're afraid that, you know what, they got a baby. And then the thing about it is, they're not even just thinking about themselves anymore. They got to think about what? The baby. And that's where it gets double because they're young. It's scary for a lot of them, right? It's scary, really scary out there. But also, it happens with middle-aged women too, right? Sadly to say, there are women out there, heartbreaking, but there are women out there, even in those middle ages, getting they're getting pregnant, and they got some. They're figuring, you know what? I'm in my mid 30s, got my career going. I'm doing well. I hooked up with this person, and all of a sudden, boom! I got pregnant. I'm in my mid 30s, right? That time, tick tock, and next thing you know, they're gonna have a baby, and then this guy. He wasn't really, you know what I mean? He come along old. He didn't know what he wants. And next thing you know, boom, they're together, and they realize, you know what, we known each other a year or two, and all of a sudden this whole thing changed. Who knows? But the point is, pregnancy is a reason why people could stop themselves from moving on. There's other responsibilities to consider. It's a pressure, right? They have to parent. They have to worry about the children, you know, or even the man who, he feels like, you know what, I got to stick with her. Right? I'd like to give the impression that all men are just the aggressors. They're not. They could do some serious damage for sure. But when we talk about women, women could what? Women could get your head spun around and put your knees on the ground if they talk to you. You know what I mean? And it ain't nice, right? There's guys out there that they can't handle it, but they're dealing with it. They fight it, but some of them are wicked. Some of them have some zest to them, and we know some could be a real challenge, right? Whatever. That is the truth. The truth is there are some women who are real tough out there. They can play that game, right? And they, especially if I gotta say it, if they're going, let's say you're the man and you ain't doing what you're supposed to do, and she got some hormones going on, and you know what I mean? It just could be the way it is. It's life, but it could get tough, right? She could get down on you. The pressure could get so, bad for her because it's an experience she hasn't gone through. There's a lot of things going, and it's not just that. I'm just saying, I'm just giving a real situation where I'm just saying you could have a tough one on your hands. Understanding they could be real, understandably so, agitated. But it don't just need to be pregnant. There are some women out there that are tough, and that is the truth, right? Like, I'm serious, and I know them. I have a family full of women, and I love them all, but I'll tell you, some of the birds are tough, man. I'm just glad they're family because they're tough. You know what I mean? They don't come up for air, Jack. And that might mess with some men. I see some men break, and it's okay. It's just, you know what I'm saying? It's not a pretty picture. They stick around, and in the end, when they can slide out, they get out, right? But the point is that pressure, but that is just another reason for why they stay. The pressure. But also, it's about distrust. Some young people, for example, distrust those adults, people who are in positions of authority, right? Like, do we as adults take young people seriously? Even when we think about the relationship, some of us don't. We don't really think that they understand and they could really experience love, right? So these young people know this about us. They think that, we can't really relate because we're the adults, and that they always feel like we're coming from them from a non-belief perspective, right? That's what it is. So, and this may make them turn, or or they maybe they'll feel like, you know what, no one's going to take them seriously, so they don't have someone to confide in, or if they make the change, so they stay where they are. They stay right in that position. But there's people who also don't trust. They just don't trust authority, like maybe the police out there. Especially young people. They don't think that the police will really help them. So some of them might feel like, you know what, I'm not even going to report what's going on. I'm unhappy here, but I don't think they're. What are they really going to do for me? See, right? And I don't think they're going to help me, so they don't make a move. Right? But there's also other things, especially when you're living in Canada, a multicultural country. Like, sometimes there's language barriers, right? People coming from different countries, speaking different languages, you know, undocumented immigrants, people who are traveling. people, some of them, they're unfortunately they're here in this environment, and you got to remember they're already feeling when they're here that they've been blessed in some way, right? They're coming to a country, they're, democracy, trying to get their citizenship, whatever. So you imagine if you spent your life trying to get a better life for yourself, so you move to a country where you feel that's going to happen, right? So you feel that that's going to happen. So what happens? You feel like, you know what? I don't want to ruin it, right? And I don't want to mess this up for me or my family. So what am I going to do? I'm just going to take it and put up with it. And see, the people who are in the relationship that are oppressive or making that situation so bad that the person, first of all, wants to leave in the first place. No, they're taking advantage. But cultures, language barriers, immigration situations, these are all realistic scenarios on why people stay and they don't move forward. And then one of the other most obvious and most talked about is people who rely on each other, right? When you rely on that person who's abusing you or mistreating you, whether it's financial or emotional support, or you rely on them to help you take care of your family, that right there is one reason. What if you're not working and you become financially dependent on that person? That person that's abusing you. So they're your main income, and maybe they've been that for a number of years. Who knows, right? So it's gotten to the point where that person is in power because they have the money, and you can't or you won't move forward because you're dependent on that money. And without that money, things seem like really critical in your life, right? Next to impossible for you to be productive in society unless you're being supported somehow. So sometimes that money is scary if you don't have it. And these people in power know that. The abusers knows that. Very well aware of it. And if you're trying to do something in your life to better your situation, a lot of times they get upset because they know you've realized the money imbalance, the power imbalance. So right there, they're not helping you and you're not helping yourself. So it's a challenge. It really is. But money is a big one. People rely on others for money, sometimes more than you think. But it gets to a point where you stay because you're used to it, you're comfortable, and you don't really want to change. You could be living even an upper scale lifestyle and you don't want that to change, right? You got used to it. All your family seeing you hooking up with an individual who's maybe a little bit more wealthy than you, and next thing you know, you're up in there in the clouds with them, and you don't want to go back to where you were. And next thing you know, right, you're saying, I'm staying. And it isn't that bad. So you try to convince yourself that it's not that bad. And then a little piece of you dies every time. See, money's not the answer to everything, but sometimes it's a lot better for some people than, hey, they'll say, I'll take it over some of the misery I've done went through. So there's a lot of perspectives we could have on money, but it's different things for different people. But one thing we know, it makes a difference. Okay? So there are other people who won't leave as well because they're figuring, you know what, this is it. I have nowhere to go. This person, I'm like, it could be a number of reasons, but they could be where they're at in their lives where they moved with you to a place, unfamiliar to themselves, even for example. And then they feel that, you know what, I don't know anybody around here, and I've made friends, your friends. My friends, your friends, and, now you're kicking me out. I'm not going to have that. I've got nowhere to go. So even if, they could leave if they wanted to, they would have nowhere to go. And if they even had lived in the same area of where they were raised, what have you, you know what? That right there, the relationships, a lot of times, you know what? They still might not have somebody to go to. Just because we're friends doesn't mean I want to live with you, right? There are some people that won't take people in. They're like, I don't, that's your issue, right? Handle yours or whatever. They'll help you for a minute, but that's why some people don't also want to be a burden to other people. See, it's not just nowhere to go. Even if a friend, right, is going to help you, you might feel, or those people who are trapped or feeling trapped, They might feel, I don't want to be a burden to that person. Why should I unload my issues on that person, a friend of mine, right? And it could go both ways. But that is something to consider, right? You might feel, hey, listen, you know what? Um, I can't do it. I can't put my issues in your life. You know what I mean? It's not fair. But some people have to, and it's unfortunate that they do it when it's almost too late, right? Where it's desperation and they go there running there instead of thinking about it. Because it takes work. It's not an easy process. But know where to go. But even when you do find somewhere to go, accountability, do you want them to be accountable for what could happen? And maybe a lot of people don't make that decision because of this very same scenario. But one thing we don't talk about is the disabled, or shall we say the enabled, right? This is just, to me, it's got a negative connotation. I've used it. I just don't really like it, but I like enabled, right? If you're having somebody who's having some difficulties, some physical dependencies, especially if they have an abusive partner, they may rely on that person for a number of things, for social, emotional support. They're not asking to be in this tough situation to be abused, or no, but some of them, right, might be in a really challenging situation if they're disabled, and they know that it's not just about resources. People that understand them carry the same weight as them, you know what I mean, like that they can identify with. That is something that's important. That's why they might not move on as well, right? They might feel that this abuse or whatever, they deserve it. Maybe they feel bad. Who knows? There's a lot of scenarios. They might feel that something's wrong with me, and you know what? You can do this to me. Maybe you feel you have the power to be oppressive towards me or mistreat me. Those are things that could be going through their mind when you're a disabled person, because it's society stuff. It really is. Society is a real challenge. And I think what has to happen is we have to recognize that. See, we've gotten to a point where people are doing themselves up so bad that it's really, the pendulum has swung so far away from us as human beings to even recognize one of the other who may be dealing with some challenges, but some of them are so caught up in themselves, they're doing themselves up, facelifts, body tucks, oh, injections, whatever. People are going crazy out there, but then see, when people are having challenges, and you wonder what this world sometimes is like with all this foolishness going on. And there's people who are enabled, and these people need some attention too, right? They need to be acknowledged, and that could be a challenge. They really get challenged, right? Because the reason why I bring this up is because the world could be a very challenging place, and we could be very judgmental and critical and dismissive. And it's sad, but it's true. There's also a beautiful part to the world, but a lot of times that, that doesn't show its face, right? When it comes to the enabled, we need to understand that, right? So this is also a challenge. So especially in those situations with the enabled, we have to understand that they are dealing with a little bit of extra challenges too. And then that's going to bring them to feeling a little bit more vulnerable, right? I would say, you know, I really would say that that's a really important note to understand, right? And it makes sense. And there are also other whole host of reasons why people, they do what they do, like why they stay. You understand? There are just so many reasons. And there's one thing to say too, that there are people that get into relationships, and it isn't until they leave that they do some reflecting on it when they've been in bad abusive relationships, where some of them could say, they look back to it and said, I could have listened. I don't know why I didn't listen. Like, the signs were there. However, for some reason, I wasn't really listening, paying attention. Like, there was a client that I did have, and we were talking about the progression of some of the behavior. And that's why I'm talking about listening, sometimes listening to yourself. This client had indicated that her man, she started to see certain signs, like him arguing with her, and it got a little carried away where he kept arguing, but it was in public. Like if they were shopping, he would be in the aisle yelling at her in public. So she goes, she shrugged it off a few times, and it just through time, now that she looked back, she just said that it started to get worse. He started to lie, like even when they were going places, and he would say, "Hey, listen, we got to do this or go this place," and then when she'd leave with him, he would say, "Oh, I just lied to get you out of there." So then there was some manipulation. So the abuse started to get worse, and she said that it even got to a point where his abuse escalated to the point where when she challenged him, he got physically aggressive and started really wailing on her. And if it wasn't for a family member being there, he would have just lost it completely on her. And he already took it to a level that she never ever thought. But then when she thought back, she went, wow, this was really, but if you look at the past, you'll see certain things, right? And it's usually, progresses, but what we see in the beginning is another story. But she did say that the abuse became unbearable. You see, it does get to the unbearable stage for a lot of people, and they usually don't plan their way out. They just get out, and it's not something that, they could foresee coming in a lot of cases, right? Sometimes you do, and for all these different reasons we've discussed, um, people stay. And it's could be like even the lack of an advocate. See, it's so important that they have an advocate in their life. Someone that they could uh, turn to, find comfort in. You know what I mean? They want to be able to believe in the system, that somebody's there to support them. So an advocate is so essential. And we have to remember that it's not just for us common folk, the abuse. It happens in all environments. The wealthy, politicians, famous people, even famous athletes, they have their powerful circles that they run in, but they have their problems as well in their own homes, in their own communities. And remember that influence. You could imagine if you're even dealing with someone who's in the public eye. And some of them people might stay for sure for a number of reasons. People say, you know what? It could be wealth, it could be influence. It just depends. However, there are people that stick around for that, right? And people who are wealthy, that even gives them more power, right, to abuse. If they know that maybe the person they've dealt with didn't have money prior to them meeting or what have you, and they're using it, right? They're using it to intimidate and oppress the other person. It could happen easily. That's what happens when you give up the power, right? Your personal power. And there's also, like we said, those threats. If you're feeling threatened, if you're just outright threatened, it's problematic for sure. It's scary. It's problematic. It's common out there. It's easy to threaten people, right? Like you're not going anywhere. It's sad. I've heard of some really sad, tragic incidents of stalking, and it's real. And we need to improve our system out there to stop some of this foolishness. It's sad, right? But then there's also people who are in families and they have to stick it out for the children's best interest, right? If they believe it's in the child's best interest. And I can't tell you that it's not, but then I can say there's a couple different sides to that we do need to look at. And I'm sure most people are like straight up, no, hands down, it's the children's best interest if I stick around. Well, you got to look at too what your, children are going to be witnessing if it's really that bad and you're putting up with it. What behaviors are they seeing? How is that going to impact their self-esteem? How are they going to look at you? And are they going to look at you the same as a parent if you're putting up with too much foolishness? Right? But how are they going to feel about themselves? Is that what they're afraid that they'll have to put up with? Like if they grow up and they're in those relationships and they see that maybe you couldn't, or you felt trapped, or you didn't have enough, you know, power, or something was going wrong where you were being victimized, right, by your partner, and your kids are looking at that and they're saying, I don't want that life. So you thinking you're doing it for them. See, there's that side of the wall that a lot of people don't tell you about. You think you're doing it for them, but in reality, you're doing it for yourself. But you think you're doing it for them, but if they see, right, all this going on, how's that good, right? If it gets to the carried away point where someone really gets hurt, and that it happens in not all relationships, of course, but many relationships where there's fighting, inner fighting, like people wanting to get out. There's a lot of violence that goes on in between that, right? And the kids could see that, and that's when they become traumatized. Children become traumatized by what they see or what they witness or experience. They might, experience the abuse too. Who knows? Right? So you got to consider, like, say, for example, if you have a partner who's abusing you physically and you don't know if they're not doing it to your child, I don't know. All I'm saying is you have to consider it in every situation, whether it's somebody beating a man, beating on a woman, or a woman beating on a man, whatever. If the children are getting treated like that as well, then you're not really doing it for the children. But we can understand why people do it for the children. It's a natural thing to do. However, like I said, you have to look at it. The scenarios could be different for different people. And there's also pressure from the children, too. There could be that pressure because they don't really understand what you as a parent might be experiencing, because usually, most of the time, it's hidden from the kids, right? You might be abused by your partner, and the kids are only coming around seeing certain things. So they got this perspective that everything's hokey dokey, right? So you feel pressure from them that, you know what, you're the troublemaker. You could be the problem, when in actuality, you're not the problem at all. You're the victim. And if you're the victim and your kids, see, this is where it gets challenging. The kids are, they're getting signals. And you might know better what's going on with you. But the kids are getting signals and they're figuring, you know what? No, we're going to put pressure on you. You're doing wrong. You know what? Like, because they want their needs met all the time, right? Children. So you got to be the bigger person and go, what's going to be in this child's best interest, right? Really. But like I said, you could have a partner that goes against the kids and puts the kids against you if you're the victim, you know what? And they can gang up because they're more powerful, they're more vocal, outspoken. So they're going to talk against you with the kids. And then that puts additional pressure on you. And it feels like a hopeless situation. But it's commonplace. Many relationships have children being used as pawns, right? One parent trying to gain favor over the other, or that connect with the child, or vice versa. Like, you want to hear it. See, that's one of the big things in relationships too. The place of children. I think a lot of children today feel that they're in the place of the parents. They can jump right in the middle of it's different, right? And I think it should be different. I think parents should parent, but if you have too many inputs from the children speaking in between, there's a lot of manipulation that could go on. So you have to be adult about it, but understand that they have a presence, children, right? So remember, it could be terrible for them, but they might feel obligated to defend you even. But even if the child's going to defend you, for example, if you have a partner who's physically aggressive on you, and then that child goes to your defense, which happens a lot, right? Is that the child will go to your defense, and what will happen is that child will endure some of that aggression. But the point is, you got to ask yourself as a parent, is that going to be fair to the child? And there's a lot of people that get out of relationship because they don't want to put that burden on their children, what they're going through. It's just how you look at it. But there's so many different scenarios. However, you have to look at the greater, right? You have to look at that. Some people don't want to put their kids through it. They're like, you're doing it to me, or we're having our problems. I can't have that. And they make decisions. It really depends. It's not all about running away. That's why I say there's no simple answer. It is case by case. And so you have to think of it on a case by case. You have to put it in context. You have to understand consequences, serious, you know what I mean? Serious rewards, like reward being, are you gonna have your sanity back if you're, you know what I mean, like, seriously, because it could take your mind on a trip if you're in that situation. And it is a very troubling situation that we have to make sure is happening less and less. But these are the pressures that people face when they're in the relationship. And then also, you have to think about the cultural and racial defenses, right? That may be used by people in the relationship, you know, to justify like their reason for abusing. And it happens too. Like it happens in different races, cultural defenses, right? Hey, you know what? They're abusing me, so I'm abusing you. They're not treating me right there in the street, so why am I? I got it tough, and that's what you'll hear, right? You ain't gonna hear those exact, but you know what I mean. There are gonna be people out there that use their cultural identity to back that up as an excuse is to get aggressive and violent, and they're the reason why I'm on you. No, that is not a reason or an excuse. The truth is, yes, there are terrible situations out there, but that doesn't give you the right to abuse somebody within your home or your relationship because you're dealing with that. That's not a given, and it should never be. It should not even be happening, period. But people do that, right? Because, oh, it is. And is it tough in this? Yes, it's tough. There's a lot of different disparaging things going on in the world, but you have to take that and put that into perspective. If you're sharing your life with someone and you care about them and you actually want to say that you love them, that's not an excuse. It doesn't work. You might want to think it works, but it doesn't work. But people use it. I hear it all the time from my clients, right? They don't understand me. This is what I'm going through, right? Yeah, I get it, but no, not acceptable. And there are those people who are just in plain denial of what is going on or how dangerous the situation could really be. The abuser might really have a ticking time bomb in them that it just could explode from time to time, and just you could be the worst part of that. And you just put yourself into the belief that it's your fault. And if you could be a better person, that person would stop doing this to me. That denial is big. Well, bull. No, it has nothing to do with that. No. But there are people that do that. They're in denial, right? I should be better I'm not, because that's what they're complaining about. He's saying it. He's saying, you know what? No, you're not doing this. You're not doing that. You're not doing that. So what are you doing? You're just trying to do all those things, and at the same time, you're still having this abuse go down. It's just never ending. So you figure, you know what? I just got to be better. They're so smart. They're so talented, and they're so powerful that I have to do better. I have to please them. So you're in denial, and you believe it's your fault because you want to. And that's the truth. You want to. You're in denial, right? And it's true. And a lot of us know when people are in denial. It's something that's one of the easiest things that you could call out. And it's only because of most of us, when we see people, friends, colleagues, even clients in denial, we know one thing. We know that there's evidence to support what we're thinking, right? By just the information that you're giving me, clearly somebody's doing all these different things and you think it's not so bad. Like, you're in denial, and you can see antecedents. I'm very big on it. What happens before the behavior? What leads up to this behavior? And that's what you have to look up to, right? Like, where is this thing going? Like, is this escalating, or is it happening too often, or what is? It's almost impossible to predict, but you cannot afford to be in denial, right? You cannot. And people just do it anyway. They're in denial. They're like, whatever, right? One of the biggest tragedies I find too is dealing with the elderly and some of the seniors, right? Senior survivors, right? And remember, these are people with these long traditional beliefs about relationships and how marriage should be a commonplace. They believe you need to be in a relationship, right? Even in the face of abuse, some of the elderly, right? Because in those situations they get to spending so many years with the person, right? They become dependent on their batterer, right, for care. right? Imagine that situation where, even if you have 20 pills that you got to take, your person, could you imagine a situation where you have to take all these different pills or medications, right, for maybe your disease that you have, and you have to take a number of pills each day, and then you have somebody that's giving you these pills in the right order, keeping you alive and functioning. You become dependent upon them, and so let's say you're taking a pill, and you take a pill that they didn't tell you to take, and next thing you know, they're slapping you upside your head, right? You're an elderly person. What are you really going to do about it? Right? That's the thing. That's what we're talking about. Like if you become dependent on the other person, even to cook for you, or even to take care of the bills or whatever. Like whatever, the dependency is there. It's well established, and is that person using it? And some people, that's why they stay as well, right? But also one of the more obvious. Where am I going? I'm elderly. Like you know, if I really want to be with someone, you know what? This is where I am. This is it. This is all I'm gonna have. I'm not going anywhere else. I'm too old to be running around. Everything's in place, so I have to deal with the abuse. Right. So they're also think about practically if they're seniors and they need to move into a place like a nursing home. Right. If you have nobody there to help you do all these different things or to visit you, they might be. You know what I mean? They might be figuring, you know what? That's probably would be my next stop. A nursing home. If I leave this spot that I'm in, I'm with this person that I depend on, right? So they might feel that I got to put up with this rather than deal with a stranger. At least I know when this person's going to get upset or what's going to agitate them. And they try to walk a fine line, and it's sad, right? It's really sad that they have to walk this fine line in a relationship. And I'll tell you, I've seen it happen, and I'm going to say it because I have seen this. I have seen, and it's concrete. This is truth, if there ever was truth. I've seen a couple, a man and a woman, in their mid 30s, and this is serious. And what happened was the man was the aggressor in the relationship, okay? And rather physical, too. Aggressive, physically aggressive, verbally, right? So they had asserted their power in the relationship, and they really had reigned for a number of years, right? However, as they got older, probably about 15, 20 years, as he became more feeble, less able to get around, because men, they don't live as long as women anyways, but he was not really getting around as much. And the tables seemed to have started turning. However, what happened was when she decided that, you know what, she's the person in power and she could do what she wanted to do. She was in a position of power, and almost like she felt like she had to get him back in some sort of way because the power his dynamic had changed and took full advantage of it because he didn't have the power anymore. He wasn't as mobile, wasn't even as verbal, and he depended highly upon this person. And you know what? She stuck around and the dynamic changed. Now, I'm not saying people do that because don't wait for that. That's not good. I'm just saying I've actually seen that happen in a number of cases where the dynamic changes based on the person's what? Dependency upon another. It plays a very big role in whether people stay or whether they go. But when they do stay or go, these are things that do happen. See, as long as we understand that abusers try to give excuses to justify the violence, right? They use many excuses. Their work, they're drinking too much, maybe they need to cut back, right? So they're just not being responsible or accountable for their actions, right? But this domestic violence, right, it could be caused by a number of things, right? However, that it could make the situation worse, but that's no excuse to use it. Do you understand? Like they can be inhibitors, which influence or even make the situation, their behavior more exact. But that's an excuse. That's an excuse. Not acceptable. That's an excuse. And we shouldn't accept these excuses. See, I don't accept, I know it's a reality that a lot of people get tore up and they drive through the streets and, they take lives and people say, oh, you know what, they're under the influence. And yeah, they were under the influence. And yeah, the mistakes do happen. But I don't know. I am I have a tendency to believe that we have to just be more accountable for our actions, basically. We should be keeping our hands to ourselves, right? We shouldn't be crossing those barriers. We don't have a right to do that, impart our will and aggression over other people. We don't have that right. But a lot of us think that we do. And people are sad because if they do have to stay or they feel that they're staying because, they're under this constant cloud, then we need to be accountable for that. We need to understand that people should treat people better. Do you understand? We should treat better than we treat ourselves. And remember, if you are a person who's in a situation where you are staying for maybe one of these reasons, I always recommend that if these are the situations, if you want to make a change, then you should make a change. And depending on the severity of the aggression, I'd say if you feel it's coming, like, make a serious change. Get some help, get some professional help, some counseling, some support in any way that you can, and try to make some change. Try to take back your life if you can, because you deserve it. You really do. It's scary, I know. However, you know what? Look, make the effort, make some change, whatever you can. It's not easy, and no one said it is. That's why we were talking about all these different reasons, because there were people who were asking me, why do people put up with these situations? And it's nice to cover that, because we have to realize that different people are going through different things. And for us to get perspective is great. Different perspective is even greater. So I want to say thank you to all my listeners. I thought it was a great podcast, us talking about why people stay in certain relationships. And just getting a basic understanding is so important, right? So please be like the wise old bird and spread the word. And thank you and take care of yourself. And till next time.